Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I did not plan to sleep in the van that night. The plan had been oil change, brake pads, and a test run on the auxiliary battery I had just mounted under the passenger seat. The radio started talking about an outbreak around noon. By evening, we were hearing sirens in every direction and seeing cars left at angles in intersections, doors open, alarms cycling until they died. I had the hood open on the 2006 Mercedes Sprinter when Jonas turned into the service lane behind the shop and killed the headlights. He brought the box of steel offcuts like I asked and a 5-gallon bucket of bolts that looked like he swept the floor of a hardware store. Maya climbed out behind him with a paramedic-style backpack bulging with supplies. She had a mask around her neck and her hands were shaking a little. I checked the time. It was still early, but every minute was starting to feel expensive. We started with the doors. The Sprinter's front doors are big, flat rectangles with enough space inside the door card to get a piece of 1/8-inch steel plate bolted through. I pulled the panels, measured twice, and used a step bit to open clean holes. We ran grade 8 bolts with fender washers to spread the load, 4 per plate. Lock nuts tight enough to feel the wrench bend. The weight changed the door swing, but it still latched. We cut wire mesh for the glass and pinned it behind the upper frame with self-tapping screws and more washers. So if someone or something broke the glass, it would hit a cage. Jonas worked fast like he always did when there was a clear job. He kept glancing at the access road through the open bay door. I could smell diesel and cut steel and the sweet stink of garbage from the big bins at the back. We had already cut the roof hatch a week earlier for a different project that never happened. I sealed it with butyl tape and a marine latch, but left the hinges exposed so we could flip it up from inside. That hatch was supposed to be for camping. Tonight, it was the place we could stand and see 360 degrees without opening a door. The hatch needed a lip so it could take weight. I welded a square tube frame around it and bolted it through the roof ribs with backing plates so the sheet metal wouldn't tear. Maya staged her kit in a plastic tote directly behind the driver's seat. I watched her count things and rebuild her pack twice. She had bandages, gauze, tourniquets, saline, a small suture kit, a blood pressure cuff, a fingertip pulse oximeter, a thermometer, ibuprofen, acetaminophen, loperamide, antihistamines, an EpiPen, and a small box of antibiotics with printed labels. She laid out a headlamp, nitrile gloves, and a roll of duct tape. "I want tape at every door," she said, "and inside the hatch. If we need to seal anything, I don't want to look for this." We talked about the plan while we worked. The highways were already jammed. Jonas had spent 6 years doing deliveries in the city and knew every loading dock and bus lane that would let a box truck sneak through. "We run the frontage roads, not the interstate," he said. "We use the bus-only shoulder when we have to. We mark pull-off zones every 15 kilometers. Industrial parks, fenced lots, anywhere with one way in and barriers we can use." He listed locations while I wrote them on a notepad and then copied them to a strip of blue painter's tape that I stuck above the dash. The tape had arrows and distance marks like a rally navigator's cheat sheet. If we lost power or phones, the tape stayed. We repurposed scaffolding planks as side skirts. I drilled angles into the body pinch welds and used U-bolts to hang a 4-inch overhang. The goal was simple: stop hands from grabbing the underbody and pulling at wiring or brake lines. The skirts made the van look lower and more finished. It also made me feel better, and that counted. We installed inward swinging barricades behind both rear doors and the side slider. I used plywood bolted to piano hinges and drawer latches so you could swing them down and lock them into place from inside. If glass broke or locks failed, the barricade would give us one more layer that opened in a way only we controlled. While I ran wiring from the starter battery to a battery isolator and then to a 1000-watt pure sine inverter, Jonas cut 2 lengths of schedule, 40 PVC pipe at 8 feet and drilled handholds. We mounted quick-release clamps on the roof rack so the pipes lived flat against the rails. From the hatch, you could grab a pipe and push at anything reaching for the roof without leaning over the edge. It was crude. It was safe. That was the theme. We packed 3 20-litre jerry cans with diesel, strapped upright inside with ratchet straps to the floor tie-downs. I checked for leaks. Diesel stores well compared to gasoline, but I still taped on dates and wrote which can was full and which one was for siphon runs. We put the jiggle siphon in a clear tote that also held a stack of shop towels, nitrile gloves, and a dedicated funnel with a screen. We taped a paper sign on the lid that said fuel only in marker so nobody would confuse it with drinking water gear. Maya added 2 blue 20-litre water jugs, 1 full, 1 empty, and wrote potable on both in block letters. By the time we cut blackout curtains and stuck adhesive Velcro to the window frames, the neighbourhood was louder. Sirens had given way to single horns that blared and never stopped and then died. A small crowd had gathered at the intersection near the big grocery. People shouted. A compact car smashed into a line of shopping carts and kept spinning its front wheels, rubber smoking until it stalled. Someone tried to open our shop's walk-in door. I slid the deadbolt. Maya lifted her head and listened. Jonas slid one of the PVC pipes half out of its clamp and then shoved it back. We kept working. When the shop lights went down to emergency mode and the compressor kicked off mid-cycle, I knew the grid had failed in more than one block. I shut the breaker panel to protect the inverter and we switched to headlamps and small red LED work lights I had in a drawer. We had agreed to red light at night to preserve night vision and draw less attention. The van interior went dim and tight, but you could still see enough to do careful work. The blackout curtains turned the windows into matte squares. We debated when to move. Jonas wanted to roll immediately. Maya said we needed to rest because we were about to make mistakes. I split the difference. We would sleep in the van inside the shop with doors shut. We would pull out before dawn. That would give us a few hours of quiet when most people were too exhausted to be out, and whatever was happening out there had not fully organised. The plan depended on the van starting, the alley being clear, and the first 6 kilometres to the industrial district being passable. We prepped everything so that at 3 in the morning we could be in the driver's seat with the key turned in under 2 minutes. I lay on the van's bench seat with my boots as a pillow and the tool roll under my elbow. I listened to the building tick and the wind move the hinge on the big bay door. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a wrench rolling, a bolt loose, a line rubbing on a sharp edge. I got up twice and checked the fuel lines near the filter housing and tucked a piece of split loom where a hose touched the crossmember. I hung a hammer within reach of the driver's headrest. I checked that the roof hatch latch was fully engaged, and I pulled the tape end to feel it stick again. I tried to sleep. I slept in slices of 5 minutes that ended with me sitting up and not knowing why. We left at 3:40. I opened the bay door and the alley looked empty, except for some garbage bags that had burst and a plastic chair on its side in the loading zone across from us. The air had the smell of a city with the power out in late summer, warm plastic, stale HVAC, and the sweet rot of food in dumpsters. I rolled the van forward, listening to every rattle as if it were a failure. Maya sat in the passenger seat with the map and the headlamp turned to its lowest red setting. Jonas climbed into the back under the hatch with the latch ready. He had one of the radios on and the other tuned to scan. We had Baofeng handheld set on a couple of simplex frequencies and programmed for the local weather band. The weather station was still broadcasting a loop about an emergency declaration and the phrase, "shelter in place." We took the access road to avoid the main boulevard. A bus sat sideways across 3 lanes, its doors open, the interior lit by what must have been its battery because the city grid was down. I kept a meter from the curb and watched wheel wells and gaps under cars. If someone moved, I wanted space to swerve without hitting a bumper and stopping. A man in a hoodie walked into the road with his hands out. He waved, then staggered, then fell to a knee, then stood again and walked toward us with a fixed look. I kept moving. Maya breathed in hard and then out. "We can't stop," she said to herself, and then louder, "We cannot stop." We turned down the service lane behind the wholesale club. Jonas tapped the roof above me to signal left. We were quiet except for the diesel and gear in the back sliding a little. I kept it slow enough to stop in one van length and fast enough to not be a target for long. We reached the back side of the industrial park in 10 minutes. The fence gates there were never locked because vendors came at odd hours, and the security guard preferred to sit in his booth and wave everyone through. The booth was empty. The gate arm had been ripped off. We pulled into the lot and parked with the rear of the van to a concrete loading dock. That gave us a solid backstop and a way to climb onto the roof without a ladder. We shut down and listened. The van ticked as metal cooled. Farther out, something popped like a firecracker. A dog barked once. Maya made tea on the small gas stove without turning on any cabin lights. She poured into a metal cup, so there was no glass clink. Jonas did a slow lap inside, checking every latch again. He opened the roof hatch 5 centimeters and looked through the gap. He lowered it and secured it. We sat and drank. We said we would rest for 30 minutes and then push to the depot for a fuel run. We had enough diesel for a day. We needed to aim for a week. When we moved again, the sky lightened just enough to turn the edges of buildings from black to shapes. The weather broadcast switched to a static tone, and then to a recorded message about emergency services being delayed. We crossed the industrial park and turned onto a delivery route Jonas knew. He pointed at a series of alleys drawn in his head. I had driven for 20 years and he still made me feel like a student in his city. We used the bus-only lane for 200 meters to bypass a jam of cars that had tangled around a median. I nudged a small hatchback's bumper with the reinforced grille, and it slid enough to let us pass. Maya watched out her window with the mesh drawn, her hand on the dash, as if she needed to feel the van move to believe we were moving. Our first pull-off zone was an abandoned lumberyard with a chain-link perimeter. The main gate was padlocked. The side service gate was not. We rolled inside and shut the gate behind us with a piece of wire twisted through the chain. We parked backed into a corner where 2 stacks of old pallets made walls at our left and rear. Jonas climbed to the roof and watched while Maya and I reorganized. We put the least critical items high and the heavy gear low. We mounted the fire extinguisher within reach of the side door and the driver. I grabbed the torque wrench and rechecked the wheel lug nuts. I ran my hands along the brake lines I could reach and checked for wetness. Everything dry. The van was our house now. House inspections had to be done with hands. We ate protein bars, drank sips of water, and did a brief radio check. Jonas counted our communications like a quartermaster counts ammunition. 2 handhelds with fully charged batteries and 4 spares. The van had a 12V charging cradle and the inverter if we needed to go faster. We had 1 small solar blanket that could add a little to a battery if we idled with the hatch cracked. Not much, but something. We set a schedule. We would try to be moving at first light and last light, parked and quiet through midday, unless we needed short scavenging runs. Night was for hiding, unless we had no choice. The depot run almost did not happen. The truck yard was farther than we liked, but Jonas said it was the best shot at diesel that was not guarded. The big company depots had security or had already been stripped by drivers. The smaller independent yards were our target. We approached from a side street that paralleled an overgrown rail spur. The chain-link fence had 3 strands of barbed wire at the top, but the gate had a pedestrian cut that anyone could slip through. We needed to get the van inside to use the truck tanks. I did not like the idea of exposure, but there was no other clear way to stock fuel for more than a day. I drove up to the gate and idled while Jonas hopped out, looked around and took the bolt cutters from the rear storage. He clipped the chain and swung the gate open wide enough for us to pull through. I moved the van inside and Jonas closed the gate with a loose loop of chain so it looked shut. The yard had 10 tractor units parked in a line, each with a pair of 150-gallon side tanks. The first 2 trucks sat low in the suspension, tanks empty. The third had weight. I knocked it with my knuckles and felt the dull thud that means liquid. Maya looked toward the small maintenance building and pointed. Through the dirty window, I could see movement, grey, slow, uncertain. 1 person or more. We had a rule. First, we look from the roof. Second, we listen. Third, we do anything else. Jonas popped the hatch and stood half out, his shoulders level with the roofline. He watched the yard and then turned slowly toward the building. He lowered himself and nodded without talking. I shut off the engine. We all sat completely still and let the yard tell us what was here. On the wind, I could hear the small noises of metal cooling, a door creak, and a sound like someone dragging a foot. No voices, no engines, no dogs. Enough stillness to proceed, but not enough to relax. We took the empty blue jug and the fuel tote. I slid the jiggle siphon into the truck tank and started the flow. The clear tube went dark and then surged. Maya counted liters in a notebook. I switched cans at 20 liters and capped carefully. Diesel on hands was not a problem for health, but I did not want any smell on the van if we could avoid it. It was another attention magnet. Jonas watched the building. He tapped the roof of the truck with the PVC pipe if anything moved. Not hard, just enough to make a sound that broke up an approaching pattern. The person in the building pushed a chair into the glass, then stopped, then pressed their hands flat against the window. The hands were grey. Their mouth moved. They did not seem to see us until we were close. We were not getting closer. We filled 3 cans. That gave us almost 60 liters on board, plus what was in our tank. I wanted to keep going until we had 6 cans full, but the movement inside the building became a shape that fell against the door and made the latch rattle. Jonas shook his head once. We packed the siphon, sealed the tote, and rolled. As we moved toward the gate, a figure rounded the corner of the building and turned its head like a machine adjusting. It took 3 steps, then 4, then walked straight for the van, not fast, but without stopping. Behind it, another shape appeared, and then another. The gate chain caught for a second. I felt panic rise like heat and forced my hands to keep the same pattern. Clutch, select first, roll, don't spin the wheels, don't stall. We cleared the gate, and Jonas pulled it closed with the loose chain. Someone hit the chain from the inside, and it snapped open and swung. But we were already turning onto the side street. We did not cheer. We did not talk for 10 minutes. Then Maya said, "We need a standard fill protocol." We were slow because we decided while doing. She was right. We wrote the steps on the blue painter's tape and stuck it next to the other strip on the dash. Park with the rear to a barrier. Engine on if risk is low. Off if noise draws. One person siphons. One person watches. One person manages containers. Stop at 3 cans if anything changes. Stop at 6 otherwise. Pack in reverse order so the last can filled is the first can used. It felt like a lot, but we wrote it down to make it automatic. Panic likes the gaps, where you need to remember the next move. By late morning, we were on the ring road around the city, using a bus lane to pass cars with doors open and luggage spilled. We marked each safe pull-off with a simple note and a grid location from the old map in the glove box. We used intersections as references and counted blocks. Phones would last for a while, but we worked like they had already died. In an empty container yard, we found a forklift with its key in. The tank was dry. We checked the maintenance office and found a box of N95 masks, a first aid kit, and a case of bottled water. Maya added the masks to her supply and sealed the first aid kit back up after taking a few items. "We leave it so someone else sees something useful," she said. The case of water went on the roof rack, strapped crosswise so it could not slide. In the afternoon, we ran into our first human roadblock. It was at the bend near the old stadium, where a 4-lane turned into 2. 2 pickup trucks had been parked bumper to bumper across both lanes, their beds filled with furniture and bags. 3 men stood in the middle with a plywood sign that said "Supplies for safe passage." Another person stood off to the side with something in their hands I could not see. We slowed. We did not stop. Jonas leaned forward between the seats so he could see my eyes in the mirror. I kept the van in second and rolled at a speed that made me the one setting the tempo. I could see the men look at the reinforced grille, the mesh on the windows, and the low-hanging side skirts. One stepped forward and lifted his empty hand. I could not see a weapon. I could see no one else nearby. That did not mean there were not others in the cars or behind the Jersey barrier. I moved into the opposite lane and then took the narrow shoulder where the curb cut was shallow. The van's right side front wheel climbed the edge and slipped, then caught. The skirt scraped but held. I felt the van's weight shift and then settle. One of the men ran at the van and slapped the side. Maya flinched. I kept the wheel steady and rolled. He shouted, but I did not hear words. Another person stepped from behind a car with a bat and tapped the rear quarter panel as we passed. We were through in 5 seconds that felt like a long minute. In the mirror, I saw the men turn their heads and watch us go. No one followed. Jonas exhaled loudly and then went quiet again. We changed our plan for the rest of the day. We avoided obvious choke points. We stopped less. We stayed north of the rail line and inside the band of short industrial strips rather than dipping into the commercial roads where the stores were. In late afternoon, we turned into a fenced utility yard and used cable spools to make a small U-shaped shelter for the van's nose. We shut down. We ate canned beans straight from the can with plastic spoons and chewed slowly like we needed the food to last longer by motion. Maya wrote a short list with dates in a small notebook. Day 1, she wrote, alive, fuel, okay, water, okay, injuries, none, van, okay, contacts, none. There were 3 lines under that for notes. She wrote, people at roadblock, avoid. She wrote, masks from office, keep sealed. She wrote, need more duct tape. We slept in shifts that night. Jonas sat under the hatch with his back against the frame and the PVC pipe across his knees. I laid on the bench again, but actually slept because the day had erased whatever was left of my body's protest. Maya slept with a hand on her medical bag, like a parent touches a toddler's shoulder in a crowd. In the middle of the night, the wind moved a loose piece of tin roofing near us. It banged. Jonas bumped the roof twice with the pipe as if to answer, then relaxed. Nothing else followed. On day 2, we left before dawn again. We found a small grocery with its loading dock door open a meter. We backed the van to the dock, and Jonas stood guard at the hatch, while Maya and I slipped through the gap. We used headlamps with red filters and moved carefully. The back room had pallets of dry goods. The front of the store had been emptied, where it was easy to see through the glass. The back still had sealed cases of canned vegetables, pasta, jarred sauces, salt, and a crate of baby formula that must have been missed because it was behind a stack of plastic containers. We took 2 cases of beans, a case of rice in small bags, a case of sauce, a plastic tub of mixed nuts, and a box of water purification tablets from a small emergency aisle. We left the baby formula where it was and put it in the notes on the dash tape. Formula, back room, loading dock store, north of rail. If we met people who needed it and were safe to help, we could send them. If we came back with different needs, we had a breadcrumb. We allocated food by weight and volume. Heavy food stayed low and centered. Water stayed low. Light items could go higher or on the roof. Nothing hard went where it could become a projectile in a sudden stop. I added rubber bungee cords across every open shelf and looped them so nothing could jump out. We set a rule for opening the back doors. Barricade closed before latch pulled. Second person hands free. Third person on roof if risk. Otherwise at the side door ready to close. We practiced this twice with the doors shut so it would be automatic when we needed it. In late morning, on day 2, the radio carried a clip transmission from a local authority about shelters at 2 high schools. We looked at each other and did not vote. We had seen enough. Large, centralized locations would be where crowds gathered. Crowds had been the problem since the first day. We marked the schools on the map so we could circle wide. We were not going near them. It was on day 3 when our plan to be strictly mobile got its first major exception. We'd been using a set of service lanes that ran behind a line of light manufacturing buildings, metal shops, small plastics, a print shop. In that strip, we saw a fenced yard with a high concrete wall on 3 sides and a sliding metal gate on the 4th. Inside was a small prefab office, a forklift, and a pile of steel tubing. It looked perfect as a rest point. I did a slow drive-by while Maya scanned. and Jonas watched the roof lines. We saw no movement. We rolled past, then circled around a block, then came back from the other direction to see if anything had changed. Nothing had. We pulled in. Jonas slid the gate closed and ran the chain through with a padlock he found hanging on the fence. He did not lock it. He just made it look locked. We reversed the van into the back corner where the concrete met the pile of tubes. The office had a small window with blinds. Maya tapped the glass with the back of her knuckle and waited. Nothing. She tried the door. Unlocked. Inside, the air was stale. A coffee cup sat with a ring at the bottom. A calendar showed the month and a crossed-out week. The desk had a first aid kit and a drawer with batteries. A corkboard had a printed evacuation plan for the site. Maya pointed at the plan and then at the yard. 1 gate, 1 building, 3 walls. If we needed to stop for more than a night, this would be safer than anything we have seen, she said. Jonas walked the perimeter and counted steps. He found an anchor point where the gate could be secured quickly with a chain if needed. He found a loose plate in the side of the prefab that could be kicked in to make a second exit if the door jammed. I looked at the pile of steel tubes and saw a lot of future barricades if needed. We stayed there that afternoon and did maintenance. I checked belt tension. I looked for any sign of coolant leak. I tightened every accessible fastener on the reinforced plates. I greased the hinges that had started to squeak with dust. I checked tyre pressures with a digital gauge and added air from the small compressor we ran off the inverter. We observed fuel use. The 2.7-litre diesel sipped when we kept the speeds low and the routes clean. Idling to charge radios and run the inverter cost more than driving slowly. We adjusted our charging accordingly and used the solar blanket on the dash when parked. We also made something new, a quiet route marker. We'd been talking about a way to guide future us back to a safe spot without leaving obvious signs for anyone else. We cut strips of blue painter's tape and wrote small arrows with a code only we would recognize. We placed them low on the backs of signposts or on the inside of curb cuts where a driver at our height could see them, but someone walking past might not notice. It was not foolproof. It felt like we were building a map on top of the city for only us. At dusk, a small group of people approached the fence. A woman spoke first. She said they needed water and a place to rest 1 hour. She kept her hands visible and her back straight. Behind her, 2 teenagers stood with backpacks. A man in his 50s leaned on a cane. Jonas went to the hatch and watched while I stepped to the gate and kept the metal between us. Maya stood 2 meters behind me with a bottle of water and a small pack with a few snack bars in it. We had talked about this. Giving was not a moral question for us. It was a security and resource question that had to be handled with rules. I told the woman we could give them some water and food, but we could not let anyone inside the yard. She nodded. She did not step closer. I slid the chain enough to make a small gap and set the bottle and the pack on the ground, then slid the chain back. The woman thanked us. Her eyes looked past me at the van and the small office. She looked tired. The man with the cane breathed with effort. The teenagers watched everything. One of them looked at the chain, and then at the top of the fence, and then at Jonas on the roof. They drank in small sips and ate without talking. The woman said there had been a shelter at a church that morning, and then panic, and then running, and then hours of quiet until some people who were not calm found them. She did not ask us for anything else. They left when they were ready. Maya watched them go and said nothing for a long time. Jonas wrote, "Gave water" on the tape and then scratched it out, then wrote it in his notebook instead, where only we saw. That night, we kept the van doors closed and the barricades up even inside the fence. We slept closer. The yard felt safe, but the city did not. In the middle of the night, Maya woke us with a hand on my shoulder and a whisper. There was the movement at the far end of the fence. A person walked along the perimeter and then stopped and then kept going. They did not try the gate. They did not look at the office. They moved like someone searching for a number on a building and then forgetting what number they were looking for. Maya watched them until they were gone. She drew a small grid and wrote a mark where she had seen them. She had started to make a map inside her notebook with boxes for yards like this and lines for routes. She made notes about times of day when noise changed. On day 4, we left the yard and followed our tape markers back to the ring road. The roadblocks were more frequent. People had realized that cars made good walls and that supplies were now the one currency. We avoided the worst of it by using the loading docks. On one dock, we found 3 pallets of bottled water that had been abandoned when the power went out and the forklift stopped. We opened one pallet and moved half to the van. We left a note on the pallet that said, "Take 1 case, keep moving." That was not a rule anyone had to follow. It was a rule we wanted to live in our heads. In the early afternoon, we hit the tanker yard. It was a different depot, larger than the first, and I knew as soon as we cut the engine that we had made a mistake by pulling in. The gate had been smashed. The fence had a section bent inward, and tyre tracks cut the dirt. The red signs on the tank said flammable, and something else in small print that we did not need to read. The yard had 2 long rows of tankers with their ladders down. I could hear a low sound like wind in a culvert. It was not wind. Jonas had the hatch open already and was scanning. He tapped twice on the roof. 2 taps meant we go forward with caution but stay ready to reverse. I kept my foot on the brake and let the van creep with idle only. From behind the far tanker, a group came out pushing a cart with 2 full jerry cans on it. They looked at us. We looked at them. We saw each other's gear. We saw that they were carrying tools and not waving. One of them lifted a hand and made a small motion that meant, "Stop." I did. He walked forward slowly with his hands away from his body. He said they were taking fuel and that it was not safe to be here because a group had been inside the main building and might still be. He said they had found the keys to 1 tanker and had siphoned some diesel. He said the noise had drawn them. Maya leaned forward and asked how many. He said enough. From the office building came a sound like a chair being pulled across a concrete floor and then a figure in the doorway. Then another, then several. They moved toward the group with the cart and then toward us. The man in front of us looked back and then at us and then back again. He did not ask for help. He backed away, waved once in a gesture that was apology and warning, and turned with his group to pull the cart toward the gate. Jonas said, "We leave, now." I reversed, then turned, then moved toward the gate. We did not try to close it. We did not try to conceal anything. We got out without touching the brakes hard enough to light them. The group with the cart turned right. We turned left. We were out onto the street in seconds. My hands were steady, but I could feel the edges of a tremor in my forearms afterward. We did not speak for a long time. Maya wrote, "Tanker yard, avoid, multiple inside, time, 14:20. Jonas marked the map with a thick X. He said, "We adjust. No more big depots unless we have a second vehicle or numbers." He was right. Our mobility was our safety. The bigger the prize, the bigger the risk. We would take our fuel from individual trucks, small yards, and any place that looked forgotten. We would not roll into places where many people had already tried. That evening, we used a small warehouse lot for rest. I checked the rear brakes because I had not liked the feel during the reverse at the yard. A small stone had lodged near the backing plate. I dislodged it with a pick and ran the wheel, smooth again. The small things mattered. A little noise could grow into a failure miles later when we needed the system to just work. I tightened a clamp on the hose we had routed to the auxiliary battery because it had started to chafe. I added a small piece of rubber as a buffer. I wrote a note to check it daily. That night, we had our first extended argument. Jonas wanted to skip the next morning's plan to check the hospital supply dock for saline and gauze. He said it would be crowded and desperate. Maya said the inpatient pharmacy and supply had separate access on the loading dock and that we would not go near the emergency entrance. She said if we did not stock medical supplies now, we would regret it when it was not optional later. I listened and looked at the map and the tape notes. I thought about the type of risk and the way we controlled it. I told them we would go, but at first light only, and only if the access road was clear. We would do a pass. If there were more than 2 people in the dock area, We would keep going. No negotiation. We all agreed to that rule, even if we all knew rules break under pressure. At 5:20 on day 5, we approached the hospital dock. The city was dull at that hour, more empty than quiet. The dock was behind the building with a separate block-numbered entrance. The door had a card reader. The dock platform had a rolling steel door halfway down. I backed in, leaving the engine running, and Jonas stood at the hatch watching both ends of the service lane. Maya and I walked to the dock door. It was unsecured. That meant someone had already been here. We lifted it slowly to avoid the rattle. Inside, metal shelving held boxes of saline, IV tubing, bandages, tape, and gloves. The pharmacy cages were farther in and locked. We stayed in the first aisle, took 5 boxes of saline, 2 boxes of pressure bandages, several packs of sterile gloves in assorted sizes, and an assortment of tape. Maya's face looked like a person doing math while carrying groceries across ice. We did not open anything. We carried the boxes directly to the van and loaded them low. We were in and out in 6 minutes. We closed the dock door and left it as we found it. Not because it mattered to anyone, but because it meant we had not changed the scene in a way that would make someone else step into a trap. As we pulled away, a car turned into the service lane and stopped at an angle that blocked half of it. The driver's door opened. A man got out and waved. He had a badge on his belt, a real one, or one that looked real. He said he needed help. Maya leaned forward and said, "What kind?" He said he needed us to move the van so he could get to the dock because his wife was inside. He did not say she worked there. He said she was inside. His voice had no force behind it. It was like he had only practiced the sentence and had nothing after it. Jonas watched the back seat of the car. I watched the man's hands. He looked exhausted. He also stood in the middle of a service lane without checking his angles. That told me his situation and his risk tolerance. I told him we could not stop. He started to say something, and then he stopped, and his shoulders dropped, and he stepped back. He looked at the van, and then at the hospital, and then at the ground. We drove around his car on the narrow shoulder, the skirts scraping the curb slightly again. We didn't look back. Maya said, "He might have been telling the truth." I said, "He might have," and then I did not say anything else. We had made the choice the night we decided to survive by rules we could follow. Sometimes the cost of those rules was leaving someone in a place where the only help we could give would break our ability to help anyone later, including us. Day 5, evening, we set up in a fenced lot behind a municipal maintenance building. There were snowplows parked inside, their blades on pallets, their trucks with city decals. We checked the cabs. Keys were not in the ignitions. We checked behind the sun visors. 2 had keys. We did not take the trucks. We made a note. Winter if it comes to that. We used the lot to do a larger maintenance cycle on the van. Oil level, okay. Coolant, okay. Belts, okay. Tire tread, measured and fine. We took a shop broom and swept the floor of the van and the entry by the side door. Sand and pebbles can become hazards when you need footing. We rigged a better latch for the interior barricade on the side door, a sliding bolt that made a more positive lock than the drawer latch. While I worked, Maya trained us. She walked us through, using the blood pressure cuff on each other. She made us practice using a tourniquet on a leg and an arm until we could do it in less than 20 seconds. She had us open and close the suture kit without touching the sterile field. She had us assemble an IV line and hang a bag and then take it down and repack it. She said, "We will not do what we do not need to, but if we need to do this, we will not be figuring it out then." She made us repeat where the EpiPen lived and how to inject it. She staged a small trauma kit near the side door with shears, gauze, tape, and a marker to write the time a tourniquet was applied. She labelled the kit with large letters. We practiced reaching it with eyes closed. On day 6, we changed zones. We had been circling the same set of industrial strips for days, and the patterns had become obvious. That was good and bad. Routine can give you safety, and can also make you predictable. We crossed the river using a service bridge that Jonas said was used by buses and maintenance only. The main bridge was clogged with cars. The service bridge had a gate arm lowered and a chain. We cut the chain and moved through, then replaced it with the chain looped so it looked closed. We left no tape here. We did not want anyone following our markers across this bridge. On the far side, the industrial area was newer. The buildings had better fences and fewer doors. The lots had irrigation and landscaping rocks that made driving across them more complicated. We found a data center with a generator building behind it. The generator's tank was diesel and had a gauge. The gauge read 1/4. We looked at each other and then at the sky and then at the small sign that said emergency power and test schedule. Jonas said he did not like the idea of touching a critical system. I agreed. We did not siphon from the generator. We moved on and found a school bus depot with 5 Bluebird buses lined up. The first 4 had low tanks. The 5th knocked full. We took 40 litres and left. The siphon routine felt clean now, like a chore we knew by each motion. We did not relax because of that feeling. We double-checked caps and wiped prints and moved. In the afternoon, we had our second encounter with people blocking a road, and it almost turned into more. They had used city trash cans and a forklift to make a wall across a cross street near a strip of auto repair shops. The sign said, info and water. There were 6 people, 3 visible, 3 in cover. We saw the eyes watching from behind the forklift. We saw how they had placed their bodies to address a car that tried to ram and a person that tried to run. They were organized. As we rolled slowly, one stepped forward and said they were making a safe area and needed to check vehicles for safety. He said, "We will give water and information." His tone was even. If we had been desperate, we might have believed him, or at least believed that the first part was true. We were not stopping. I angled the van to show the mesh, the plates, the skirts. I kept my hands at 10 and 2, my posture forward, my eyes on the road. I looked like someone not afraid to scrape a trash can into the forklift if that is what would happen. He stepped aside. He said nothing else. We passed. Jonas said, "This is going to get more formal. People will start building rules that they enforce. We will not be part of their rules unless we choose to be." Maya looked back and then at me. "We need rules about when we try to talk and when we do not," she said, "because we keep deciding in the moment, and that is not the same as having a standard." We made a quick framework. We would only stop for groups fewer than 3 in the open with no cover for anyone, and only if we could park with our rear to a hard barrier. We would not stop at any sign that required us to enter a space. We wrote it on tape. We knew tape was not law. We treated it like it was. That night, we found a fenced yard with a roll-up door into a warehouse space. Inside, the warehouse was empty except for a row of metal shelves and a long bench with a vise. We backed the van inside and pulled the door down almost closed. We left a 10-centimeter gap to avoid trapping fumes. We turned the red interior lights on low and ate. Jonas went through his delivery driver memory again, listing the places we had not touched. He drew a small loop on the map around a section of riverfront that had equipment rental yards. "Small diesel generators, light towers, fuel cans," he said. "They may be empty now, but the office safes sometimes have keys. We plan to check one yard early morning." Maya then said the thing that had been coming. She said we had passed a group of people on day 3 that looked like they needed more than water and a snack. She said she had not spoken because she knew what we would say, and she wanted to say it fully now. She said, "If we see someone with a child or a person who cannot move on their own, I want us to stop within our rules and consider bringing them for one segment to a safer spot." Jonas stared at the floor. He said, "We cannot take everyone." She said, "I am not asking to take everyone." He said, "We open the door and we may never close it." I said we would add a rule: 1 seat, 1 segment, once per day maximum within our safe stop framework, and only if it does not route us into a crowded zone. We would not break the plan for it, but we would not ignore our capacity to do one thing if it did not risk the whole van. Jonas did not like it. He did not fight the rule. He took a long time to say, okay. Day 7 was the day it all got tested. The rental yard was partly stripped, the chain was down, the office door was open. We did not go inside the office. We checked the lot. 3 light towers had empty tanks. 2 small diesel compressors had a few litres each. We took 10 litres and left the rest. We found 2 plastic fuel cans left in a corner. 1 cracked, 1 intact. We took the intact one and wrote "crack can, north corner" in the notes in case we needed to come back with tape to patch and move it. As we pulled out, we heard the sound of tyres on gravel. A sedan pulled in fast and then braked hard when they saw us. The car held a woman and a boy, maybe 8 years old. She looked through the windshield at the van, and then at us, and then at her hands on the steering wheel. She glanced at the office. She did not get out. She made a gesture with her palm up that meant help without saying a word. We ran the framework in our heads. 2 people, open lot, clear lines of sight, no one else in cover. Our rear was to the fence. We could shift the van 6 feet and be back to a concrete K-rail. That would give us a barrier, but it would also take 10 seconds to do. Jonas said, "We do not know who else is coming." Maya said, "We do not know, but we know who is here." I moved the van back to the K-rail in one smooth roll. We opened the side door but kept the barricade latched. I stood behind it. Maya stood by the door frame. Jonas watched the gate. The woman rolled down her window and said she had been at a store, and then people started running and she grabbed her son and drove. She said she had only half a tank and no water and had been trying to find one place with a fence that did not have people yelling. She asked if she could sit in the lot with us for an hour to catch her breath. She did not ask for fuel. She did not ask for food. She asked to sit behind a fence in silence. We gave her a litre of water and 2 granola bars through the gap. She cried once, one small sound, and stopped. Her son ate without looking away from the van. We sat like that for 15 minutes. Then Jonas saw another car turn into the lot. He said "time," softly. The woman saw it too. She started her car. She said "thank you." She left. The second car pulled in and stopped where hers had been. 4 men got out. They looked around like they were inventorying a store. I shut the door and threw the slide bolt on the interior barricade. We did not speak. The men stood near the office and argued. They did not look at us. We left out the back gate we had already opened, the one we had seen hidden behind a stack of pallets, the one Jonas found during his first perimeter walk, because he always does that. We drove to a different part of the city. The radio said nothing useful. The weather band was still on an emergency loop. We saw smoke columns in 2 places. We made a longer loop that day and then returned to our original side of the river by the service bridge. We replaced the chain again. We wrote a new note on the tape. Rental yard early only, multiple parties. 1 mother and child left before others arrived. Framework worked. Jonas rolled the word framework in his mouth like a bolt he wasn't sure was threaded. He looked at Maya. He nodded once, like a small concession to a rule made in good faith. By the end of that first week, our van had become a system with layers. Outside, steel plates, mesh, skirts. On the roof, pipes, solar, a position to see. Inside, barricades that swung inward, gear staged where it would be needed, a place for each function. In the dash, blue tape with rules and notes. In our heads, routes that did not depend on any one road, stops we could trust for an hour, a rhythm that kept us from making high-risk decisions when tired. We were not more comfortable. We were more deliberate. We had learned that the city had a pulse now, and that the pulse had times when it surged. Early morning, before first light, was our window to move with the smallest number of variables. Midday was when exhaustion and hunger made people take more chances, and when the roads clogged again with people trying to find something open. Late afternoon was when people tried to reach a place before dark and the noise rose. Night was when we stopped pretending we were like we had been before. Night was when we shut the curtains, used red light, and did not open a door for anything. We had also learned that every choice had to carry forward. If we cut a chain, we re-looped it so the place looked closed. If we took a box from a shelf, We did not leave the shelf broken. If we wrote a note for future us, we made it specific and accurate. If we decided on a rule, we wrote it where we could see it, and we followed it until a new rule replaced it. That was not about being kind to a city that felt like it was breaking. It was about building a pattern that would save our attention for when we needed to decide fast. On the morning of day 8, with the week behind us and the second week in front of us, like a long roll of road, we sat in the van with the engine running and the hatch latched and the curtains open just enough to see through the mesh. Maya read the notes from the week. Jonas traced the map with a finger. I listened to the diesel idle and felt for any new vibration in the steering wheel that would mean something had changed. We were 3 people in a box on wheels with metal on the doors and pipes on the roof, and we had a way to move from one block to another without stopping in the place between, unless we chose to. The city outside did not become safer because we felt more prepared. It was the same city with the same risks. The difference was that our plan was not an idea anymore. It was a set of actions we could do, even when tired and afraid. We left before the sun cleared the warehouses. We turned onto a delivery route and headed toward a section of town we had not touched. There were small factories that made food packaging and a bus lane that Jonas said stayed clear until it did not. We had the same 3 roles we always had: driver, watcher, medic, and we rotated parts of those roles when we could. We had fuel enough for several days and a way to get more that did not make us stand long in one place. We had food that would keep without refrigeration and a stove for quick heat. We had water and a way to purify more if we found it. We had rules that told us how to stop and when to not. We were not heroes and we were not villains. We were a mechanic, a nurse, and a driver who knew the city. Our job was not to solve the big problem. Our job was to live long enough to have a choice later about where to go and who to be. The van moved through the early light with the sound a diesel makes when it is warmed and loaded, but not strained. The tires rolled. The route bent. We did not speak much. We did not need to. We had already said what we needed to do, and then we did it. That was the plan. That was how the first week ended and the second began. If the road stayed open, we would continue. If it closed, we would find another one. We took the turn, Jonas pointed out, with a tap on the roof. The van cleared a line of pallets left in the road. The mesh caught a glint of light and then went dull again. The blue tape above the dash with our rules vibrated slightly with the engine. I lifted my foot just a little and felt the van settle into the new stretch of pavement. We kept going. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.